The story I'm about to tell you is going to change your views about couple perspective. This is a story of a man named Scott Peterson and the wife Peterson. In 2002, Scott Peterson and his wife Laci Peterson, they were living in Medisto, California, a city in the Central Valley, which its population at the time was just over 2,000. At the time, Medisto was known for primarily agriculture, suburban neighborhood, and relatively low rate of violent crime at the time, largely a metropolitan area. The Peterson lived in Covena Avenue, a quiet residence street where neighbors frequently walk dogs in interaction casually. Scott Peterson was born in August 1972. Raised in Santiago, he attended several colleges before earning a degree in agriculture business from California Polytechnic University in St. Louis Obscene. By 2002, he was working as a fertilizer salesman, a job that required travel throughout California. Friends and co-workers described him as personable and confident. Laci Peterson was born in January 1975 and grew up in Elkhorn, California. She later attended California Polytechnic State University, where she met Scott Peterson while they were both working at a campus restaurant. The couple married in 1997. Laci worked in a substitute teacher before stopping due to her pregnancy. According to family members and friends, she was excited about being a mother and had plans preparing for her childbirth. By December 2002, Laci was 8 months pregnant. The couple had publicly announced that they were expecting a boy, from which they planned to name him Connor. Testimony was established that Laci was physically active but cautious of her pregnancy, and her doctor advised her against strenuous activities. On December 23, 2002, the day before Laci disappeared, she attended Christmas Eve gathering with family. Witness later testified that she appeared in good spirits and discussed plans for the holiday. There was no document indicating that she was intended to leave Medisto or that she was in distress. On the morning of December 24, 2002, Peter later told the police that he woke up and watched television while Laci cleaned the house. According to Scott, Laci planned to mop the floor and walk the family dog, a golden retriever named Marquise. Scott left the house late in the morning to go fishing in Berkeley Marina, approximately 90 miles away. Scott Peterson stated that Laci was wearing a black maternity pant and light cuddle top. He left the house. Investigators and Laci was feeling well. He told the family plan was gathering the next day and expected to be home and return safe. Scott drove to Berkeley Marina and launched his boat. A parking receipt later confirmed that he was present there. Scott told the police that he fished in several hours before returning to Medisto in the afternoon. When Scott returned home around 4:30 p.m., he found Marquise in the backyard with his leash still attached. Laci was not in the house. Scott contacted Laci's mother, Sharon Rocha, to ask whether Laci had gone there. She was not, and she was told the Medisto Police Department approximately 5:17 p.m. to report his wife missing. Police officers arrived at Peterson's home and began initial search around the neighborhood. Friends and family quickly joined the effort. Flyers was printed and volunteers began canvassing neighboring streets. Parks and areas were all the places that was being searched. Because Laci was visibly pregnant, she was at the Christmas Eve, and this search escalated rapidly. Over the next days, investigators interviewed neighbors and collected witness statements. Multiple people recorded and reported seeing a pregnant woman walking a dog in the neighborhood. On the morning of December 24th, however, the description varied in terms of clothing, timing, and direction of travel. Some accounted different from Scott Peterson's description from what his wife was wearing. Police confirmed that Scott Peterson's fishing trip received at the marina. Officers searched Berkeley Marina surrounding the waters using sonar and dive team. At the stage investigation publicly, there was no evidence found for foul play. The case was treated as a missing person case, As days passed without progress, the search expanded. Law enforcement and coordinated large scale involving helicopters, boats, and hundreds of volunteers. National media covered increasingly and steadily. Laci Peterson's image appeared frequently on television news and programs. Candle nights was held in Medisto surrounding the community. In the early January 2003, investigators discovered that Peterson had been involved in extramarital relationship with Amber Frey, a massage therapist from Fresno. Evidence showed that Scott and Frey had unmarried lives. Statements made few weeks before Laci was reported missing. While Amber Frey recognized Scott Peterson from the Laci Peterson from the news coverage, she contacted the police and agreed to cooperate under police supervision. She recorded a phone call conversation with Scott Peterson. In the call, Scott spoke with Freya while attending public vigils of Laci. The recording later became a central element of prosecution case. Following the public disclosure of the affair, media attention intensified significantly. Scott Peterson became the focus of a widespread scrutiny. His demeanor during the interview and public appearance was frequently analyzed. Law enforcement and officials later testified that the level of the media attention complicated the investigation. In April 2003, nearly 4 months after Laci Peterson disappeared, a passerby discovered a body of a male fetus on the shoreline of San Francisco. The following day, the partial remains of an adult female was found nearby. Forensic testing confirmed that the remains of those was Cronas and Laci Peterson. During the condition, it remains that the medical examiner was unable to determine the precise cause of death or exact time of death. However, investigators noted that the location was within the general area of Berkeley Marina, where Scott Peterson had gone fishing on December 24th. Scott Peterson was arrested on the 18th of April 2003 in San Diego County. At the time of his arrest, he was carrying a case, multiple cell phones, camping equipment, and changing in his appearance, including his dyed hair. Prosecutors later argued that the circumstance suggested the intent of fleeing. The defense maintained that Scott Peterson altered his appearance due to travels and media harassment. The trial began in June 2004 after the venue was moved from San Nicolas County to San Mateo County and publicly judgment. During the selection of these, the jury took place. The prosecutors and the jurors questioned extensively about the exposure of media coverage and the view of circumstantial events. During this trial, prosecutors presented a case based largely on circumstance and evidence. They argued that Scott Peterson had motive, citing his extramarital affair with the statement being unattached. They emphasized the timing of the fishing and the discovery of the location of the remains and inconsistency in his statements earlier. The prosecution also introduced evidence regarding to Peterson's boat and concentrated the anchor was inside. They argued that the additional anchor may have been made to disregard the defense challenge and his claims, stating that no physical evidence supported the existing anchor. The defense attorney argued that this was no direct evidence linking Scott Peterson to the murder. They emphasized that there was no one or a witness that observed the crime. No murder weapon was found. No forensic evidence placed Scott at the scene. The defense also pointed that the report of the burglary activity around the neighborhood at the time, Laci's disappearance was argued and the law enforcement found prematurely on Scott Peterson. Expert witnesses from both sides testified that about the Tyndall movement in San Francisco Bay, the prosecution argued that evidence supports their timeline, while the defense argued that the science was inconclusive and reliably established on how the remains entered the water. After several months of testimony, the jury began deliberation. In November 2004, Scott Peterson was found guilty of first-degree murder in the death of Laci Peterson and second-degree death in Cronas Peterson. They concluded that the murder of Laci Peterson was premeditated. In March 2005, Scott Peterson was sentenced to death. He was transferred to San Quentin State Prison and was placed on death row. The sentence included impact statements and additional legal arguments. Over the following years, Scott Peterson pursued appeal, raising claims related to jury selection, juror misconduct, evidential ruling, and impact of media coverage. In 2020, the California Supreme Court overturned Peterson's death sentence, ruling the errors during the jury selection and it violated legal standard. The court upheld the murder conviction. In 2021, Scott Peterson was resentenced to life prison without the possibility of parole. Subsequently, legal motions would have sought the review, and based on the claim, newly discovered evidence was shown up during procedural consent. Prosecutors have been opposed with the effort, and the court continued to reveal the filings and the establishment. More than 2 decades later, after Laci Peterson's disappearance, the case remained widely discussed in frequent cities, and it was discussed under the circumstance of evidence, media influence, challenges of ensuring fair trial in high-profile cases. The Scott Peterson case continues to be examined in legal education, journalism, and public disclosure. An example of how a complex investigation unfolds and intensifies scrutiny. It reflects the role of the court at weighing evidence, the possibility of jury, and long-term impact of criminal proceedings on families and communities. As the legal process continues through the appeal and review, the case remains a recorded flow of how justice system addresses serious allegations, evaluates evidence, and applies procedural safeguard. The story of Laci and Scott Peterson about the legal proceeding following the remaining part of the ongoing discussion about justice, process, and lasting effects on high process case on society and communities. If you're interested in stories like this or crime stories, like and follow the page for more.